Every day we see more tents under bridges, more families living out of cars. And while the problems seem insurmountable, the solutions are simpler than you think. We share the real stories and the real solutions of homelessness, what works, what doesn't, and how communities like ours can do better. I'm Baron King, and this is Give Me Shelter. Well, thank you for joining us. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe on however you listen or watch us. We'd love to make sure you see all the episodes that are coming up. So, as you probably heard me say in episode 1, 4 years ago before I joined the Chat Foundation, I had a limited understanding of the complexity of homelessness and the solutions that are available. Anytime you're trying to solve a problem and you have some knowledge gaps or limitations in understanding of a problem, it's going to severely limit your ability to think accurately about a problem and come up with progressive solutions. In a sense, there's a learning curve, right? We all have that. We had a learning curve when we started our public education or private education. When we took our first job, we probably knew something about the field, but how's the organization work? What do I need to do on a daily basis? And so in just about everything, there's a learning curve, whether you're learning how to cook or learning how to do art or play a guitar or whatever. So there's definitely a learning curve to understanding homelessness. In a sense, when I started, my biggest problem was I didn't know what I didn't know. That's kind of dangerous, right? If you're given a list at the beginning of something and say, here's the things you don't know, then you can just jump right in and understand everything, figure everything out, and move forward. But I didn't know what I didn't know. And so it took a while through conversations, observations, research, conferences, interaction with homeless people to understand this problem of homelessness intimately. And there's this thing that you psychology nerds will love. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the Dunning-Kruger effect is when somebody with very limited knowledge believes they have the ability to come up with effective solutions to a problem. You may know somebody like that in your life, but I don't want to be that person. I'd rather humble myself, learn from the ground up, and then feel confident in what I know about the problem. One of my favorite quotes is by Mark Twain. It's not what we don't know that causes the problem. It's what we know that just ain't so. And so I've titled this episode, What I've Learned Along the Way. Hopefully it will be helpful to you. But the first thing is this idea that homelessness is largely caused by people's choices or making bad decisions. It's this idea that it prioritizes the role of individual choices or individual decisions over systemic problems. And what I would say, and this is kind of in a nutshell, that homelessness results from an interplay between systemic factors like lack of affordable housing, poverty, and inadequate social safety nets, and individual factors such as mental illness, substance use, personal crisis, job loss, or family breakdown. It's really not one or the other. It's very rare that we see a case of homelessness where it's just simply not enough housing. It might be not enough housing, but also a limited ability to generate income. That's really important. While individual circumstances can trigger homelessness, they're typically not the driving factor. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. So what are the broader systemic problems related to homelessness? Well, number one is the lack of affordable housing. Why is that? Well, without getting too deep into the housing crisis, I'd really encourage you to go back to Housing 101, How We Got Here, where I talk for about 30 minutes on why the housing situation in the United States has contributed so significantly to our homeless crisis. But what we have in most communities is rental properties and homes that have increased exponentially in value, and that makes their cost significantly more expensive. In fact, since 2005 to the present, home values, and that relates to mortgage prices and rental prices, have increased 76%. 76% increase since 2005. So if our wages kept up with that, that wouldn't be a problem, right? But our wage increases over that same period have been 9%. Now, the wages have fluctuated more over time than property values. Sure, we had the property value dip in 2008 and 2009, but there was a quick rebound from that. But our wage growth simply hasn't kept pace. And what that means is every year there's a bigger gap between the cost of shelter and the money that I bring in. That has led to continual increases in our homeless population. And so one big systemic change that we need to do is add more units to our housing supply. HUD estimates that we're approximately 7 million units short of a housing supply that will stabilize U.S. housing prices. And I would add, we need to go a step further. A lot of the properties that people are looking at in Chattanooga, rental properties, are 2 or 3 bedroom homes or apartments. And that's good for some folks. It's good for families. It's good for couples. But if I'm a single individual, and 72% of the people that have applied for housing assistance in Chattanooga are single individuals, if I'm a single individual and I'm lucky enough to get a housing voucher, but all I can find are 2 or 3 bedroom apartments, that voucher is no good to me. And so we need to build not only a housing supply, but we need to build efficiencies. We need to build 1 bedroom apartments, and we need to place them in places that are conducive to public transportation, employment, and things like that. And so there's a lot that needs to happen on that systemic structural level of housing supply. So we talked about the wage gap. That we have increases in levels of poverty and low wages. Most of us think about the homeless individuals, the people we see on the street, but there's this second tier of people that are living right on the poverty line. They may be individuals that don't always get their rent paid on time. They may be one car repair away from missing a rent payment entirely. These people are what we call rent burdened. They're paying more than 30% of their monthly income in rent. And when you do that, you start having to make choices because there's only a limited amount of money in that bank account. So let's say I'm paying 40% of my income in rent. That's going to make me have to make some choices on food. Maybe I can't afford fresh food. Maybe I have to go to the food bank. Maybe I rely on an organization like Chat Foundation to provide some of the supplemental meals that I'll need to get through the month. I might feel like something's wrong in my body and I should go see a doctor, but you know what? I don't have insurance and I can't afford the appointment, so I'll just brush it off. Maybe it's nothing. People start making a lot of unhealthy choices due to constrained financial resources. And so that is a big part of the problem. Another issue is inadequate safety nets. Welfare programs such as social services, housing subsidies mean people lack the necessary support to stay housed. So here's some bad news coming down the pike. We have just changed into a new federal administration. We've just heard over the summer the appropriations bill that was passed, and it was called the Big Beautiful Bill. I don't think it's big, but it's not beautiful. And I am confident in saying that the results of this legislation are going to drastically increase homelessness. Why do I say that? Well, for the 5 years prior to 2024, homeless rates have hovered about 8 to 9% increases year over year. It's been fairly stable. We're at 770,000 unsheltered people on any given night in the United States. But in 2024, the federal government released the homeless numbers, and we saw an 18% increase in homelessness. So we went from 5 years of 8 to 9% increases to 18%. We saw a 39% increase in family homelessness, which is really concerning. So there's a number of factors. Why did that play into? Well, the inflation that we've had over the last 3 years was a huge impact. Rising housing costs, housing supply that's not enough. Sound like a broken record there. But now this big, beautiful bill has caused reductions in HUD benefits. So HUD is reducing its staff significantly, and their proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year is going to be 40% less than last year. That's a drastic cut. And HUD provides financial support to those that are on the margins, homeless and needing housing support. The VA is drastically cutting back its staffing. We haven't seen that their budget is going to be impacted, but you've probably heard for years now that while the VA provides important benefits to our veterans, there's usually long wait times for appointments, for support, and things like that. So reducing HUD significantly by maybe as much as 50% is going to exacerbate that problem. SNAP, which is food stamps, is being cut. Department of Agriculture, which provides significant support to area food banks, that's being cut. And then Medicaid cuts. Medicaid cuts are going to be huge. We operate 4 residential programs in the area. Just about every person in our programs is on Medicaid, and that's their only source of treatment for physical or behavioral health issues. So by cutting these 5 issues, I would argue that the people that we serve, nearly 100% of them use one or more, maybe all 5 of those resources. And we're seeing that the current federal administration is getting rid of these programs. I can't envision a scenario where we lose those safety net supports and we don't see homelessness skyrocket. One last thing on that. We just exited a program. It was a state-funded program here in Tennessee to do eviction prevention. We did this for 18 months. We spent about $1.6 million of aid money keeping people housed. Why? Because it's 90% cheaper to keep somebody housed and make the landlord whole and let this person try and start over again than it is to evict them and rehouse them. But those eviction support resources are gone. They've dried up. There's nothing coming down the pike on those. And so, during that 18 months, we kept 275 households intact and housed. We no longer have the ability to do that. So we would expect that those eviction rates are just going to increase. Another growing problem is an unfavorable labor market. We've had historically low employment for the last 7-8 years. It's been great. It's been about 3.4%. It's about 3.3% in Chattanooga. So Chattanooga is a good place to find employment. But we are seeing this year in 2025 employment numbers start to tick upwards. And so there's a lot of uncertainty in the economy. The tariff policy is causing companies to say, you know what, we don't know what's going on financially. It's hard for us to make investments in our organization. So we're holding pat and we're not hiring anybody. And so that labor market is playing into some of the problems that we're seeing. All right, so one of the other things I've learned is the role in mental illness and homelessness. A lot of people ask me questions like, is mental illness the reason there's so many homeless people? I would propose that it's a factor when you're homeless. It's not a driving factor. It's not statistically significant enough to be the cause of homelessness. In the United States, we have a mental health scenario where approximately 25% of people in the general population struggle with some form of mental illness, whether it's depression or anxiety or a combination of factors. And then in the homeless community, it's estimated that about 22% of those that are homeless are struggling with mental illness. So statistically, there's not a significant difference between those two populations. But here's what I would argue. It's kind of a chicken and the egg question. Does mental illness cause homelessness, or does homelessness cause mental illness? And I would say yes to both. I believe that some people are unable to maintain sufficient housing due to serious mental illness. We've seen people that just get to a place where they can't function, they lose everything, and they get evicted. But I would argue that the healthiest person, if they were homeless and unsheltered for 6 to 12 months, would start having signs and symptoms of depression, despondency, anxiety, PTSD, and so forth. And so while it is an important factor in understanding homelessness and the work that's necessary to get somebody rehoused and stable, it's really, we should not look at mental illness as typically a driving factor in homelessness. Same with substance use disorder. We have high rates of substance use in the United States, higher than most first world countries. And yet the difference between the diagnosis rates of substance use disorder between housed and unhoused is only about a 10% difference. Most people in the United States, I've been a therapist for a while, and people sometimes when they come home after a hard day at work or at the end of the week, they'll have a glass of wine or two. And they do that to relax, to unwind, to, in a sense, self-medicate some of the stress and anxiety of just getting through life. In the United States, that, having a couple glasses of wine after work or at the end of the week, that's socially acceptable. If I would propose that if you're living on the street, a glass of wine might not cut it. It may not medicate the severe anxiety that you may be feeling or the depression that you're feeling. Plus, people have limited resources. They don't have a debit card that they can just go to the store and buy stuff. So some people are forced to find something on the street that can cut the anxiety, cut the stress, whether that's illegal or illegal substances. It's all over the place. But people are trying to medicate, and they're trying to do it with whatever they have. They don't have access to anti-anxiety or antidepressant medications. So another thing that's been eye-opening is the role of the Justice Department in homelessness. Tennessee is a very challenging state to be homeless in. We have some of the harshest bills targeting homeless individuals in the nation. We are the only state in the nation that has a felony public camping bill. What this means is if you are arrested for camping on public property, that could be in a park, on a government facility, on a street bench, you could be charged with a felony. That puts you into prison. If you can't make bail, you're going to stay in prison. That's going to burden the taxpayer. You're going to have to go to court. You're either going to get a public defender or try and hire an attorney. There's a cost related there. If you're convicted, there may be jail time, but at the very minimum, there's going to be fines and court costs, which you cannot probably pay. Then there's this other factor. You're going to have a conviction on your record, not a misdemeanor, but a felony. If I'm seeking housing assistance, if I'm seeking a housing voucher and I have a felony conviction, there's a good chance that they're not going to give me one. So asking the police department to clean up our homeless problem doesn't get somebody housed. It just increases the hurdles to get somebody housed. It makes it impossible for some people to get housed. Now, one thing that I've heard people say is that I think people are homeless because they choose to be, that they want to be. I have a different take on this. We see people coming into the homeless continuum very eager to do whatever it takes to get housed. But the longer they are housed, it's an endless stream of applications, different steps that they have to do to get housing assistance. And along the way, they hear the word no a lot. And the longer you hear the word no, it can just be incredibly frustrating, right? So much to the point that some individuals stop asking for help. And so we see people after a year or two of homelessness that they really shift their focus from trying to get back into housing to just saying, you know what, I'm going to live day by day just trying to get by. And their behaviors and their actions and their words, I think, lead people to believe that they're making a choice. But I would suggest that we are wired to desire things, okay? The way we are made, we desire for better food, better jobs, the next thing, a vacation, good things. We want those things. When we don't get those things, when we are denied things that we want, or even more importantly, things that we need, it creates an internal psychic pain. And humans are very interesting. when we have too much psychic pain, we do whatever it takes to eliminate that pain. And so if we're longing for something and we hear no so many times, or subconsciously, most homeless individuals result to trying to find ways to kill desire. Let that sink in. We try and eliminate our desire for life to be better. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, because when that happens, the light goes out. Our staff at Chat Foundation works on the front lines with people experiencing homelessness. Some are newly homeless, some have been homeless for years. And what I tell them is, imagine that they're a candle and their flame is slowly going out. Our main role is gently blowing enough oxygen to keep that candle going, because that candle represents their will to take the next step, to fill out the next application, to do the next thing. We can help them only by providing direction and resource. We can't help them get the job. We can't get the job for them. We can't get the apartment for them. They have to be part of this process. Once that light of desire goes out, all forward movement stops. And so it's really critical that the support we have maintains their focus on trying to make life better. So another area that I've learned a lot about is family and relationship breakdown. In the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, even in the 70s, it wasn't unusual for people to be born in a town or a county, grow up in that same place, get a job in that town, raise their family there, and maybe buried in the same town, right? Live their whole life in a town. It's not that way now. Technology has really changed where we can be, what we can do. We can work from home, we can work from another country, and so people are much more mobile. Take my life, for example. I lived in 7 different states before I was 15 years old. And people are much more mobile these days. What that means is, if I experience a hardship or a crisis, my family or my lifelong friends may not be in the same town. So requesting or getting help from somebody might not be as easy. I might be on the other side of the country. And so those people that are related to me or are my friends might not just have the ability to give me a spot on their couch or help me in a meaningful way. And so breakdowns in families and relationships and the nature of our more mobile society make it more challenging. One of the best and most effective, most cost-effective interventions for homelessness is called diversion. And so what is diversion? One of the first questions we ask people when we're meeting them and assessing their strengths and their obstacles to housing is we ask them about their family and where they grew up and their relationships, because sometimes there are family members living out of state, out of town, that are willing to help, and they don't know their family member is homeless. Perhaps the individual feels shame and can't make the call. Perhaps they've had a falling out and they feel that it's impossible to mend the fences. Maybe they've asked for help so many times that they just can't go back to the well and ask for help again. So what we do is we try and understand their family tree and their family relationships. What we'll do is we'll work with them to reach out to family members and say, hey, we've got John here. He's been homeless for a couple of months. He's really struggling. Would you be able to take him in? Oftentimes the answer is yes, and we'll find the money to buy a bus ticket or some method of transportation to get our individual into the town or the place or the state where they can get help. And so that's just another factor. It can be an easy fix. We also have individuals that really have broken so many bridges or are so isolated that there's really no help. And so that's another problem that exacerbates homelessness. So what I've been trying to paint a picture of is we tend to look at individual challenges with an individual as the driving factor. I think they need to be taken into consideration, but really systemic choices or systemic systems is where our where our strategies need to be focused. We have systems that are just not able to handle the volume of homeless individuals, and we believe that it's going to get worse. There's more pressure there. So these issues, and I can't state this enough, mental illness, underemployment or unemployment, substance use disorder, physical health, Those are all factors, but they're not driving factors in this problem. And one thing that it's important to say is that correlation does not prove causation. Just because an individual has a certain condition doesn't mean that that condition caused the problem. Let me prove this. On any given day, 70% of the people that got into a car accident on the way to work had breakfast before they left the house. 70%. Does that mean that breakfast caused their car accident? No. It's correlated, but it's not causative. And so I think some of these factors with homelessness, it's very similar. These issues that we see people struggling with, they're not statistically significantly different from people in general population. Another interesting thing I've learned along the way is that every homeless individual's situation is unique. And I like to view homelessness on a continuum because there's a significant difference between how a person is and how they're functioning on their first day of homelessness, the day after eviction, than the person that's been homeless and unsheltered for 3 years. We make a lot of interventions with individuals. Our organization offers over 30 services designed to support people in their basic daily needs and put them on a pathway to self-sufficiency. And yet, most individuals that come to us don't or can't use all 30 of those services. They're just not appropriate. So, similar to if you went to a therapist or a doctor, usually the first step is assessment. We do individual assessments on the people we work with, and we find out what are their strengths, what are their obstacles to housing. And we're trying to determine what type of specific interventions do we need to make? Because we've got 30 tools in our toolbox. Most carpenters will come into your house with a whole toolbox full of tools. They don't use all of them all at once. They use the appropriate tool for the right job at the right time, and that's what we're trying to do. So let me tell you a story that kind of illustrates what happened. We run a shelter called the McClellan Shelter for Families. It has 13 units on 11th Street. It's first come, first serve. We're the only shelter in a 100-mile radius that allows entire families to stay intact. We allow male individuals to be in the family shelter. Most shelters don't allow that. The male has to find some other option while the female caregiver stays with the kids. We had a couple come to us from West Tennessee, and she was 8 months pregnant, and they had a 2-year-old. They came to the shelter. We had an opening. So during intake, we did one of the questions we asked was, are you employed or are you able to work? And he indicated that, yeah, he's able to work. He's pretty good with his hands. He loves to work. Can we get him a job? So we turned him over to those that work in our workforce development program. We connected him with the local Volkswagen plant, which runs 3 shifts, starting at $22 to $24 an hour. He got a second shift job and was ready to start. He came back to us and said, okay, I've got the job. They told me I needed steel-toed boots or shoes. We have a thrift store and a clothing department where we give out roughly $900,000 worth of clothing to individuals in Chattanooga on a yearly basis. We didn't have anything on the store shelves, but somebody went down into our basement, dug through our shoe bins, and found some steel-toed shoes. The other need he had was transportation. Volkswagen is not in the city limits. It's quite a distance from here. We don't have the financial ability to pay for people's Ubers, taxis, and the bus lines don't go to all the places we need them to. But we work with 2 local nonprofit bike groups that repair broken and donated bikes. So we went down into our motor pool, pulled out a bicycle, and so we set him up. We got him the interview. We got him shelter. He was able to eat in our cafeteria. We got him shoes, and we got him a bike. We offer 30 services. We tapped into 5. He started working. He would ride his bike. It would take him about 40 minutes to ride from Center City, Chattanooga, out to the Volkswagen plant at 5 p.m. on roads that don't have a bike path. He would work an 8-hour shift and come back at 3 a.m. in the dark and come home. In 6 weeks, he had enough cash on hand to make a deposit on an apartment and then continue paying rent. This was at zero expense to the taxpayer, and it was quick and it was efficient. And what I would argue is that not everybody's situation is the same. And if we can make quick interventions and we can kind of make really good diagnostics of the problem, I'm a firm believer that whether you're a therapist working with a person, a doctor, or an engineer, or really any problem solver, there's a 3-step process: assessment, diagnosis, treatment plan. We did that quickly, efficiently, and got this person housed. It can be that simple. It's not that every person experiencing homelessness is going to end up soaking up taxpayer money. Most people think that because I work in nonprofit that I must be a Democrat. I'm not. I believe in fiscal responsibility, and I hate to see high taxes or waste, but I also am socially progressive, and I think that we can be doing more with our tax base than what we're doing. And so that's who I am. That's where I'm at. But what I'm trying to illustrate with this is quick, efficient, and targeted interventions can work really quickly, and we can do better in homelessness intervention than just relying on the current network of HUD-funded programs. Okay, this one topic I've just kind of really realized in the last year is there's something out there that has an incredible impact on people experiencing homelessness, and that is the power of the word no. No is a killer. And what I mean is we have some of the most vulnerable people experiencing unbearable living conditions. And when they ask for help, they often hear the word no. And I would ask you, if you kept asking for help and you always heard the word no, would you continue asking for help? One of the first things that people lose when they become homeless is dignity. People stop looking them in the eye, stop getting to know them, won't use their first name, won't learn their first name. They quickly believe that they are a burden, and there's a lot of shame associated with homelessness. And so one of the things that I think is important is we rely at Chat Foundation on a high level of volunteer involvement. Why do we do this? Because we have a lot of needs to meet. We have a lot of services to provide. And getting people from the community to volunteer and come in and just smile at those struggling with homelessness, just to look them in the face, getting to know their name, getting to know their story. You cannot underestimate the power that has in buoying that person up. There's one thing that I love. In our community center, we have a lot of different things going on any given day, but the best day to come into our community center is Wednesday mornings. Why is that? Well, we have a partnership with Chat State's Barber School, and on Wednesday mornings from 9 to noon, we have about 20 barber students come in and give free haircuts to those experiencing homelessness. And I would say on any given day, our community center is a pretty somber place. There's not a lot of happiness. There's no laughing. People are struggling just to survive. And yet on Wednesday mornings, these barbers are touching them, using their name, looking them in the eye, and just giving them a haircut. Just helping them maintain a level of hygiene that is impossible for them to do on their own. And it makes them feel human again. And I don't think I can say that enough, that how we interact with homeless individuals is really, really critical. When we avoid them on the street, when we tell them to just go get a job, when we avert our eyes, I don't think we realize how much that hurts the soul of the individual we're trying to help. And what I would say is, I think we need to change the way we look at the homeless. We typically look at them like they're inconveniencing us. We don't like looking at their reality because that scares us a little bit. And in closing, what I would say is, would we treat homeless individuals differently if we knew their name? If we knew their story? If we spent time with them? Would we treat them differently if one of our family members had experienced homelessness. I think one of the biggest problems is we maintain this us and them mentality, and we create separation and distance from those experiencing homelessness. If you can, spend time at a soup kitchen, at a thrift store, at a food bank, at a park bench, at a community center. Try and get yourself more comfortable with this. And I think what the result might be is we start treating homeless individuals more like our neighbors, more like the human beings that they are, and maybe we restore some of the lost dignity that is part of what you lose when you're homeless. Well, that's all I have for today. If you haven't hit subscribe, please hit subscribe. Really excited about some upcoming topics. I'm going to have some guests in the studio next month. So these are people that are experts on topics that I'm only somewhat knowledgeable about. And listen, I don't want to pretend to be the expert where I'm not. We really like that. Also, if you have questions, comments, ideas for topics, please email us at info@chatfoundation.org. That's chat, CHATT, foundation.org. We would love to get your comments, concerns, ideas, feedback, and topics that you want covered. But thanks so much for listening. Thanks for listening to Give Me Shelter. If you made it this far in the episode, I invite you to share it with at least one person today, because change happens one conversation at a time. I'm Baron King. We'll see you next time.